Hello painters! Well, we're almost finished with our bowl of fruit. I hope you've enjoyed painting along with me. Today I'd like to paint on the nest and the eggs, so let's get started. Today I'd like to get started on the nest and the eggs. We're going to start with a number 4 oval blender. We'll be using raw sienna, brown earth, burnt umber, yellow oxide, and some warm white. I'm going to start with my raw sienna, and I want to create the inside of this nest. I'm going to, for now, ignore the eggs. That pattern can always be put back on. So I'm just basically filling in with some raw sienna on the inside of the nest. I've blot my brush, and then I'm going to pick up brown earth. I'm going to place the brown earth over here in this darker area. Then I'm going to blot my brush and just blend that brown earth over into the raw sienna. And I'm using a real light touch right now. I want to create a little bit of, just a little bit of that redness that brown earth has over here in the raw sienna area. Now I've blotted my brush and I'm going to pick up burnt umber. I want this inside right side of the nest to be very dark. If our light is coming from the upper right, there wouldn't be much light shining on this part of the nest. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my raw sienna. I just blotted my brush, I didn't wash it, and I want to create a lightness right along this front curve of the nest. Again, I'm going to ignore this leaf, it can be put back on. And I want to create a lightness along the top curve also. Now I'm blotting and picking up brown earth again. I want to work some brown earth into this. This lower edge of the nest on top of the leaf is all fuzzy with grasses and straw, so I'm just going to kind of dry brush that onto the leaf and let it disappear. Brown earth again. I'm going to stick that underneath that other leaf that we'll paint later. Again, this is all fuzzy down here where it sits on top of these leaves, so I'm going to just blend that in and let it disappear. Now I'm still with my brown earth, and I want to place, I do want to maintain the separation between the outside of the nest and the inside of the nest. I'm just kind of dabbing this on. My brush is slightly damp, but doesn't make my fingers wet, with water. And then I'm just picking up paint, placing it, blotting my brush, and blending. I'm back into my raw sienna again, creating a fullness towards the center so that the nest will look round. And I'm going to do that again at the top edge. Blotting my brush, and I'm going to pick up my burnt umber again. I want to create a lot of darkness behind this pear, so I'm carefully pushing that burnt umber right up next to the edge of the pear so that it'll sit behind, and also up under the apple and leaf, up in this small area, under this leaf on the right hand side, and along the lower edge. And I'm just dabbing and dry brushing to blend these. It doesn't have to be real smooth, so I'm not trying to smooth it out a lot because it is a nest. It wants to look kind of choppy. Now I'm washing my brush and back into my raw sienna. And I just want to blend this a little bit more right around this edge of the outside of the nest. I want to create this inside-outside look. And because the inside of my nest is dry now, I can go back inside, create a little more raw sienna on the light side, quite strong because the light is hitting that section of the nest. And I want to work a little more brown earth there just because I want to create a textural look, and so I want it to look choppy. I don't want it to look just solid raw sienna. I want this kind of a choppy look, so I'm just whisking and dabbing a little bit of brown earth into the raw sienna. Now back to my burnt umber, and I just want to make sure I've got enough dark in here on this far right hand side, and maybe creating a little bit of texture by dabbing some dark over there in the light. Now the outside of the nest, I'm going into my yellow oxide to create the lightest areas on the outside part of the nest, and that's going to be right in here. Let's not do straight yellow oxide to start with. Let's do some yellow oxide plus raw sienna, just so that we don't jump values too fast and create problems. So there's my yellow oxide and raw sienna mixed together. I want to create a roundness. I want to make sure this looks fat and round, so I'm creating some light right in this fattest forward part of the nest. And then we're going to let that dry and add the grasses and the eggs. My nest is dry now, and I've started on my eggs so that I can show you some of the steps along the way. We're going to use number 2 round Bringle blender. You want to use one, make sure it still has a bit of a point on it so that you can get the edges of your eggs. Also, you're going to use maybe just a little more water with your paint than usual so that you can push that paint right out to the edge of your pattern line and have a nice clean egg. I'm starting with my Payne's Gray mixed with just a little bit of dirty white, and I'm going to push that out to the edge. This is kind of the dark area of my egg, so I'm starting with a little darker value. Now I'm picking up my dirty white, and again I'm picking up just a tiny bit of drop of water so that I can make sure I have a good tip on my brush. And with my light value, I'm going to come along, push that right out to the edge, just with the tip of the brush mostly. Then I'm going to blot my brush, lay the brush down, and blend it with little circular motions. This is basic smooshing. Alright, once I need to have a little bit of reflected light along that far left edge. So with my light value, come in here and just with the tip of the brush, I'll lay that on, blot the brush, lay the brush down, and just gently, with a little circular movement, blend that in. Once that's dry, then you're going to pick up your dirty white. We'll say that this is where we would be if this egg was dry. And I'm going to stipple to create the lightest part of the egg. Make sure that if you have to hold back, you need to blot your brush, stipple, and do a little bit of dry rubbing. When that's dry, you want to create a little bit more of a green shade, a little bit of a green value to your eggs. The phthalo blue is a little bit too strong to use for the whole painting of the egg, but it's a great color to tint the eggs with a little bit. So I'm mixing just a little bit of phthalo blue with a little bit of water, and I've got it on a little bit larger round brush now so that I have a little more brush bristles to rub this on. You can use a little magic mix. Got to be careful with phthalo blue, it's very strong. But you can basically just kind of glaze over the whole egg once you've got that highlight in place. When your glaze is dry, then you would pick up your dirty white again, and once again stipple and dry rub to create your light value. You want to make sure on these eggs, just don't make them too blue. We have a tendency to think of bird eggs as being very, very blue, but they're more pale. I suppose some are very bright blue, but for the most part they're a little more pale than what we think. So don't make them too bright. One thing you could do if your eggs are getting too bright is you could just dry rub the entire egg with the dirty white, and then come back and tickle a little more of the blue to blend it. You want to make sure that your glaze is dry before you do any of the dry rubbing, because you're going to get a really bright blue if you start blending white and phthalo blue together. Now, my final, kind of final, is I'm going to pick up my Payne's Gray again, and I'm just going to dry rub just to make sure I don't have this fuzzy white bullseye on the egg. I just want to dry rub it down a little bit. This forward egg isn't finished yet, but these two eggs here are looking pretty good to me. Alright, then with a liner brush you'll mix Payne's Gray with burnt umber, and you'll just add little, from the tip of your liner brush, just some little tiny irregular dots. I tend to want to keep them mostly in the dark and medium value areas. Then also with your liner brush you're going to make all of your little grasses. So you can use your yellow oxide, raw sienna, warm white, brown earth, burned umber, all of the colors, kind of earthy colors that are in your nest. And you're going to make lots of little, just kind of squiggle lines. I'll put a little bit of white with mine so you can see them, but I want to keep my paint kind of loose with water, and I'm going to just make lots of little squiggles that come from the nest, and some come out onto the leaves, some are going to come up onto the nest. You want to make sure you get a light area right in this front part of the nest, so you can add a little bit extra white in there. And make sure that you crisscross and just let your hand have a happy holiday, going every which way. Some of them will be wiggly and you can do little squiggly lines. Some of them will be straighter crisscross lines. But take your time, and so that you can use, and I would use a fairly small liner brush, maybe an 0.0 or a 1, or maybe a 0.00 even, depending on how heavy-handed you are. And just keep these very small and very kind of short. Don't let them be too long. This bird spent a lot of time tucking all those little ends in. So once you get finished, then you'll be able to paint this leaf on top of the nest, and next time we'll paint blue grapes, purple grapes, so that then we'll be able to place all of these leaves in place. And with that, we'll be very close to being finished. Hope you enjoyed painting with me. Paint happy!